Shalom, this is Yair Davidiy speaking to you from the land of Israel. We represent Brit-Am, Hebrew nations, an organization that finds the lost in tribes amongst Western nations. And we prove it from the Bible, we prove it from secular evidence. And today we are going to discuss an aspect of the biblical proof, not so much evidence concerning the identification, specific identification of the lost in tribes. So this too is a fact, and this too we have dwelt with in some depth and some length as well. But at present we're going to discuss another point concerning the different characteristics of Judah and Israel. Judah means, in the biblical terms, the people of the Jews, the Jewish people, now living in the land of Israel, in the state of Israel, and also living in the diaspora in America and in Europe and elsewhere. In fact, small communities are found in many places throughout the world. These are the Jewish people, and the Jewish people have their own individual characteristics, their own individual tasks in this life to fulfill. As to the lost 10 tribes, each one had its separate goal, its separate role to play in history, in the development of humanity, in the development of biblical character that has been laid out in a blueprint before them. This is what throughout history they have been doing. But the 10 tribes had their role to play. Their task was to go down to the level of the Gentiles, of the non-Israelite nations, and to evolve upwards, bringing the rest of the world with them, and to humanize humanity, as well as bring to fruition the promises that had been given unto them. And this is what to some degree they have done. And if anything, they should do this even more and bring it to a greater expression, their own inner Israelite potential in this direction. The Jews, on the other hand, had the task to learn the Torah, to keep the Torah, and this is what they have done. They should have done it more, but they did do it to a reasonable degree, and they are still doing it. And so too, this is what part of their national tasks. In addition, in their own times, they also have the mission or the goal or the duty upon them to develop the land of Israel in preparation for all of the tribes to return to it. But we have not reached that stage. Ultimately, the 10 tribes and the Jews of Judah will reunite, as we find in Ezekiel 37 when the two sticks come together, and also in Isaiah 11:11. And throughout the Bible we find this point mentioned of the ultimate reunification of Judah and the 10 tribes. We're not yet reached that point. Before we reach that point, they still have their separate tasks to fulfill and their different roles to play. And so this present talk is to spread some light from biblical verses on that role, on a specific aspect of that role, one could say. So we have in Isaiah 11:12, he says, "He, that is God Almighty, will raise an ensign, a sign, a standard for the nations." That means the peoples of Israel, and will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. And here we outcasts of Israel meaning the 10 tribes, as the commentaries mentioned and expressed. Also the Midrash says that, outcasts, because they were, as if to say, the 10 tribes were picked up and thrown out of the land of Israel, but they stayed together. Even though they were the ones, despite staying together, they were the ones who lost consciousness and awareness of their ancestry. But they stayed together more or less, and they moved together, and even when they'd been split up, they recoalesced, as if this was their destiny. And this is what they've done throughout history, and they are still together more or less, whereas the Jews were dispersed, were scattered all over the earth, and they're still scattered to some degree throughout all of the peoples. So this is the dispersed of Judah, and the outcasts of Judah, of Israel, will come together. Will come together once more in the end times. We have this. We have a Midrash Tanchuma, a rabbinical source, says concerning who it is Isaiah pronounced his prophecy, speaking only concerning Judah and Joseph. Said Rabbi Shmuel ben son of Nahmani, in the name of Rabbi Yonatan, when Joseph and Judah were arguing, the holy angels said to each other, let us go down and see what is happening. Usually when a bull and a lion confront each other, the bull retreats before the lion. In this case, a bull, Joseph, and a lion, Judah arguing, there's a standoff. Jealousy, that is jealousy, conflict between the two will continue to exist until the Messiah comes, as it says. The envy also of Ephraim shall depart, and adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. Isaiah 11:13. That was Midrash Tanchuma by Yigash 4. Similar Midrash in Midrash Breshit Rabbati. We also have Midrash Agada Breshit, and they say more or less the same thing. They quote this verse, Isaiah 11:13. Isaiah 11:13, where it says the same thing. It says in one translation, it says, when then the jealousy of Judah will depart, and those who harass Judah will be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and Judah shall not harass Ephraim. The Midrashim understood this to mean that Judah and Joseph, there would always be a certain rivalry, a certain conflict, a certain tension between the two until the end times, until they reunite. And this conflict, this tension will exist between them until the end. And we find before the Lost Tribes were conquered by the Assyrians and taken out and taken into exile and lost consciousness of their ancestry, they were a separate entity that separated themselves from Judah after the death of King Solomon. The 10 tribes broke apart, and then they had their own separate kingdom. They did not want to be part of Judah. Judah was also separate, and the two kingdoms sometimes were together, sometimes they cooperated with each other, at other times they fought against each other. There was tension between the two throughout much of their history until the Lost Tribes were taken into exile, and according to these sources there will always be some degree of rivalry, of conflict, of enmity even between the two until they reunite. This is not to say that other verses indicate that they will also at times cooperate, and the way to bring about future redemption is to increase this attribute of cooperation, this will to cooperate between the two. Even though there are also other verses that warn Judah not to get too close to the 10 tribes when they were still in the land of Israel, lest the paganism the 10 tribes practiced also be copied by people in Judah. So that we had these two counter influences and recommendations found in the prophets on this matter. At all events, we're now discussing Isaiah 11:13. Isaiah 11:13 says, and the jealousy of Ephraim will depart, and those who harass Judah will be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. Jealousy of Ephraim will depart, and then that is juxtaposed to Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah. So in the Hebrew we can understand this to say the jealousy of Ephraim will depart, kindred Ephraim. That is two intonations. One is that the jealousy that Ephraim will feel against Judah, and also the jealousy that other non-Israelite nations will have for Ephraim. Ephraim will be troubled or will always have to resist the jealousy that other nations have against them. We identify Ephraim mainly with English-speaking peoples, the Britain and the USA and so on, and Australia and New Zealand, and these nations, Canada, and these nations are great nations, wealthy nations, progressive nations, and other peoples of the world are always jealous of them, always against them in many ways, instinctively adverse to them. And this is not entirely explainable by material acquisitions, because in some cases those who are instinctively against them are just as well off as they are. It is more, they just like their attitude, they just like who they are, they just like this feeling of distinctiveness the real chosenness that these peoples of Ephraim have. Other peoples of the world resent this and are jealous of it. And this jealousy is reflected, as if to say, internalized by Ephraim, and he brings it out on Judah. Then Ephraim is jealous of Judah. And the jealousy of Ephraim for Judah is also, even comes to expression, those who identify themselves as lost in tribes. They feel that Judah is not letting them in the land, is not giving them equal rights as the Jews, is not recognizing them as equals to themselves, or is not letting them, is not even acknowledging their religion. They feel resentment. They have a different religion to the Jewish people, and they feel that the Jews are not fair because the Jews do not recognize their religion, as if to say, even though their religion for them it is probably permissible according to the Bible, but for the point of view of the Jewish religion, their religion is idolatry, and for a Jew to accept such beliefs would be counter to his faith and would be the worst thing that he could do in his whole life, and it would destroy him. And they don't care. These people from these Christian missionaries and so on, who often also come out of Ephraim, don't care, but they go ahead and they try and bring Jews over to their way of thinking, even though the Jew has nothing to benefit from it, and it would harm him greatly. So that is a point that should be mentioned. And this also reflects a little bit the envy of Ephraim for Judah. He does not like Judah being distinctive. He does not like Judah having his own religion, his own understanding of the faith, of the Holy Scriptures, and his inner comprehension of them, which he obtains through knowing the Hebrew language, and also through day on end, day and night, for centuries, having delved, buried himself in and dedicated himself to understanding the very meaning of the text and intricacies of its intonations, together with the traditions that had been acquired from centuries, and also through the message that had been given by Moses himself when the Torah was bequeathed to all of the children of Israel, and the Jews have managed to maintain and retain. So that is it. That is a point. We also have this point that Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. The word harass is translated from the Hebrew. Is translated from the Hebrew zar, but not yitzar. Yitzar, from the root zara or zoreh, which can also mean constrict, restrain, and it happens that Jews sometimes want to reform Ephraim or identify too closely with Ephraim, want Ephraim to think like they do, and try and impose their do-good, wishy-washy, liberal type of attitudes on Ephraim, and this is maybe to the detriment of Ephraim, and this also leads to a constriction of the ability of Ephraim to be himself, and so this will be a problem, and so in the end times this will not be so. Judah will realize that Ephraim needs to be himself, to let Ephraim give expression to himself, and encourage Ephraim to do so, whereas Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah and will not try and limit the ability of Judah to live in the land of Israel and to keep the Jewish religion and to fulfill the Jewish faith as he understands it necessary and as God Almighty commanded him to do so. It should be also remembered that in the end times they will reunite, the differences will be removed, and there will be a recognition of Judah, and we find this hinted at in the book of Genesis, but also expressly said in the Zechariah, the prophet Zechariah, chapter 8. He says, verse 23, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, in those days 10 men from all the nations will grasp the garment of a Jew, saying, Let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you." This will happen in the end times. In the meantime, it has not happened. In the meantime, each separate entity, each separate group, Judah and Joseph, have to go in their own way and develop themselves along their own paths. Each one has its own individuality that it has to fulfill. But this individuality, the individual of each, is also finds explained in Jewish mysticism. We're not going to talk about Jewish mysticism at the moment because that's not our subject, and it's not a subject we want to get into. It doesn't apply. It is something that the Jews keep to themselves, or should keep to themselves, and it does not really apply to other people, but it has aspects that are worth noting. For instance, it says that there are universal principles, and each section of the Israelite nation represents one of these principles. And these universal principles give expression in nature, they give expression in throughout existence, but they also have a specific historical expression where they are taken from. And we have Judah and we have Joseph. And Joseph represents Yisod, he represents a principle, a foundation. Joseph is the provider. Joseph is the source from which all the other tribes, the source of benefits, the blessings from all the other tribes, from all of the world, and then from the rest of the world, through the other tribes, it all channels into Joseph. Joseph is the provider. Joseph takes it. And Joseph is the foundation. And one of the principles of strengthening the foundation is sexual propriety. Joseph in Egypt resisted the advances of the wife of Potiphar. He would not allow himself to be seduced by his master's wife, and therefore he suffered because of it. He suffered because of it, and he was unjustly accused of attempted rape. He was put in prison, but out of that he became the effectual governor, ruler over Egypt, and through becoming the ruler over Egypt, he was able to save all of the people of Egypt, all of the people in the known world at that time, and also all of his own family, the rest of the other tribes, who all came down to Egypt and were fed and furnished and help because of him, through him. He was a provider, and now that should also be the task of Joseph. Joseph also reformed Egypt from within. He respected religion, he gave the priests special prerogatives, but he reformed the nation, he moved people from one area to another, and he provided them with sustenance, with food in time of famine. And so that too is the task of Joseph in this world today. That's what Joseph should be doing. He should be rectifying the nations and helping them, as in fact he does do. But he should be doing this even more. He should be doing this in the awe of the Torah, in the awe of biblical principles. And he should continue to do this. And this is the principle that Joseph represents. On the other hand, Judah represents Malkut, Malkut meaning royalty or kingship, or mean the revelation of reality of God in this world. And Judah receives his power to sustain himself from Joseph, from Yisod, through Joseph. Judah receives what he needs, and then Judah gives it all back to all of the others, through being what he is, through learning the Torah and doing the will of God Almighty. And this is the task of Joseph, and this is the principle that Judah stands for. And this is what these philosophical, mystical principles teach us, and they're worth taking note of. And they're also based on biblical passages and biblical excerpts, and going into the biblical literal input of the Bible, which we shall do at another time. That is the basis of what we are speaking about. Judah and Joseph are separate entities. They each should realize their separateness, not try to be like each other, not try to imitate each other, not interpose upon each other, not impose upon each other, not blur the borders, but maintain their separateness, and each develop itself according to the pathway that destiny has laid out for them. Now this was based on verses in Isaiah 11, so we will quickly go through Isaiah 11 just to give you an overview of this very important chapter. And at another time perhaps we should go into this chapter in more depth, but just to give an outline of what it talks about. So it begins Isaiah 11:1. The shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, a branch from his roots will bear fruit. The future Messiah will be a descendant of King David, the son of Jesse. That's what it means, a root from the stem of Jesse. Future Messiah will be descended from David, the son of Jesse, of Ishai in Hebrew. And also says this in verse 2 and verse 3, the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and strength, the Spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. Yet he will delight in the fear of the Lord, and he will not judge by what his eyes see, nor make a decision by what his ears hear. Shall be divinely inspired and have outstanding personal qualities, including especially the fear of the Almighty, as the verses say. And verse 4 says, with righteousness he will judge the poor, and decide with fairness for the afflicted of the earth, and he will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. So he will come, he will rule over all of the earth. First he will rule over Judah, then over the rest of Israel, then over all the earth, and he will rectify what needs to be rectified. He will make straight the crooked. He will judge with justice, and he will destroy the wicked. And a lot of the problems of this earth are due to wicked people, because otherwise things would be much better, and a lot of our problems would disappear. And that is, we're just talking now about natural cause and effect, relationships. But even more so, when God sees that we are trying to go in the right path, he will help us even more, and divine intervention will protect and save us and secure us. Verse 5 says, also will righteousness will be the belt about his waist, and faithfulness the belt about his waist. And also righteousness will be the belt about his loins, and faithfulness the belt about his waist. And the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together. A little boy will lead them, also the cow and the bear will graze. The young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The nursling child will play by the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child will put his hand in the viper's den. That is, in the Messianic era there will be peace, and the strong shall not victimize the weak. Verse 9, they will not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of God as the waters cover the sea. The entire world will have an awareness of God Almighty. Verse 10, and then in that day the nations will resort to the root of Jesse, and will stand as a signal for the peoples, and the resting place will be glorious. All the peoples of the earth, they will want to be ruled by the Messiah, descendant of Jesse through David. And 11, it says, and that will happen on that day that the Lord will again recover the second time his hand, the remnant of his people will remain, from Assyria, Egypt, Patras, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. Now these areas, they refer to places where the 10 tribes were exiled, and also to areas where the Jews were scattered unto. From all of these regions, they will return, the 10 tribes and the Judah will return and reunite in the land of Israel. As it says in verse 12, and he will lift up a standard for the nations and assemble the banished ones of Israel, and will gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. The outcast 10 tribes and the dispersed of Judah will be gathered together from all of the earth. Verse 13, that is what the verse we discussed, and the jealousy of Ephraim will depart, and those who harass Judah will be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. And then 14, they will swoop down on the slopes of the Philistines on the west. Together they will plunder the sons of the east. They will possess Edom and Moab. And the sons of Ammon will be subject to them. So this verse and its implications, we have discussed it elsewhere. In Hebrew, it actually says Wafu Bakativ Plishtim Yama. In other words, they will cause the Philistines, that is the Palestinian peoples, to be flown out, to be taken out, to be transferred elsewhere by aeroplane to some area in the west. Judah and Ephraim together will do this. They will cooperate with each other, and they will take the Palestinians and place them and throw them away to some other area. They will help them, God willing, and enable them to resettle in peace in some other region to the west of the land of Israel, possibly in South America or in North Africa. A place will be found, and there are places that could be suitable to them, and this will be the solution to the Middle East crisis. And this is what will be done, and also they will cooperate in fighting other enemies such as Edom and Moab and Ammon, that will be against them, that will fight the enemies together, will reunite, and reunification also means military cooperation and other partnerships. Verse 15 says, and the Lord will utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt, and he will wave his hand over the river, and with a scorching wind he will strike it into 7 streams and make men walk over dry shod, and there will be a highway from Assyria for the remnant of his people who will be left, just as it was for Israel on the day they came out from the land of Egypt. This is referring to an event, we don't exactly know what it means, but miracles will take place. And God willing, when the time comes, we will see them, and the Lord will rule over his people. Thank you very much.